part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Lights, camera, action.
Welcome to the Requel Podcast, a new podcast, part of the Fanfare Podcast here at Press Play. In this podcast, I, your host, Tyler, takes a property and decides, we pitch ideas. Basically, we take an established franchise and say, what would we do with it? Are we rebooting it? Are we making a sequel, midquel, sidequel? What would we do? And then we pitch it. Either I pitch to you or we pitch it to each other, my guests and I. Welcome to this special Halloween spooky episode of Requel Legacies. Enjoy.
Hey everybody, welcome to a Requel episode of In the Car with Tyler as I'm pitching this new and exciting property. It's Halloween time, right? And I'm with my daughter, Selah. Say hi, Selah.
Hi.
And we're out driving and doing some Halloween decorating today, maybe. And I had my thought. One of my all-time favorite stories for Halloween time is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I have loved this story since I was a child. And I saw the Disney classic. And what's funny is, as many versions as I have watched of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I still think the Disney version holds up the best. It has all the imagery, all the mystery, and it's just straight on point. Now, I am a fan of Sleepy Hollow, the Tim Burton film, but there are issues with it. And a lot of those issues go inside with being a little too gory for what they're trying to do. Being, I don't know, over the top, and I think it falls into the gory with just, the heads getting cut off. One thing that bothered Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman to me is more comical than it is scary. I don't really believe that he would have the power to lop heads as they show. And, they blend in elements of like the idea of the witchcraft and stuff like that, which is fine, but I think it gets a little goofy with the way they do the old crone. But I like the atmosphere and environment. Ichabod being a constable is cool, but at the same time, it's starting to step too far from the story removed. Now, with all that being said, let's continue with my idea. See, I think, the Sleepy Hollow TV series was neat. I think it went a little too far and a little too long, but whatever. But one thing about it that bugged me always was I think that there was no kind of meta in-joke that the town itself should be Tarrytown, which is based on, and then, Sleepy Hollow was the nickname. And I think that makes it more interesting than the actual town being called Sleepy Hollow. I think that there should have been a joke about Ichabod in that show knowing Irving and Irving writing the book and naming his character and him being frustrated of how he was depicted in the book. I think that would have worked. There's a little bit too much in that show that made Ichabod Crane like the greatest American revolutionary person that no one's ever heard of. But it had its ideas in there, and I won't deconstruct that show right now. But what I'm saying is I like certain elements. Now, my pitch is I think it would be really cool is if we did a new version of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but you use it as running parallel stories, okay? So you have a modern day setting with, let's go back to two kind of classic Halloween films with Hocus Pocus and Ernest Scared Stupid. Now, both of them start with flashbacks that integrate into the story. I think is a very effective way of storytelling in this sense. We open up in Tarrytown, which is Sleepy Hollow, preparing for Halloween. It's that week of Halloween. It opens, our opening scene is basically a narration, but it's the ride of Ichabod Crane. It's at the big climax of the original Sleepy Hollow. And then, we have the scene, the pumpkin and Ichabod, and then it cuts, and it's a teacher talking to high schoolers, much like Hocus Pocus. Okay? And then we go to a new kid in school who's fascinated by this. He has a It can be a girl or let's make our main protagonist a female, and she has a little brother. The little brother is obsessed with the story. It's happy that they're living there. He wants to do history on it, and everyone's getting excited for Halloween time. And like I said, it's very similar to the plot of Hocus Pocus. Yes, I know, but what do we talk about with art? But one of the big differences is we have the brother doing research about the town and digging about things that happened. But what we do is we have scenes that go back and we have these flashbacks. And we tell more in depth about Ichabod Crane. In the book, it alludes to the schoolhouse maybe being haunted. And I think that alluding to more things happened, like in the book, that we are left, is it real or is it not? And we start having basically her story, or his, start reflecting kind of Ichabod's journey. Her brother is very Ichabod Crane-ish, okay? Smart, but, awkward. And we have scenes of, is the schoolhouse haunted? We find out that the current school is built on top of the old schoolhouse location. Things like that. We find out that the town had its own witch trials, but they did later on, and they didn't go that far. And there's allusions to, more happening in Sleepy Hollow than what just a legend. And that the Headless Horseman, we have the Sleepy Hollow graveyard, and we build up a more creepy environment in this little village town. But there's also elements of fun. And then, the end of the film is kind of where we have a descendant of the Van Rippers, the Van Brunts, people who founded the town. A little bit kind of like, if anyone is familiar with The Covenant, right? That was what it's called, yeah. The, movie that dealt with the Sons of Ipswich boys. That had it was an interesting movie. It wasn't perfect. It was very kind of Lost Boys-ish of the 2000s. I think Sebastian Stan was in it. It was an interesting idea. It's not a great film, but it was fun enough, okay? Where we have the town's family, founders, and things are going on, and then boom. We have kind of the new version of being chased by the Headless Horseman towards the climax. And you just kind of find out that the town is haunted. The town has a history. And that the original settlers here discovered that the town had, a draw to supernatural because of battles and people that died nearby during the Revolutionary War. And it just became a very sorrowful place. And you could even say a cursed land or whatever. And they just basically have to make it through Halloween. And you have people, out trick-or-treating, and you have the parents there's Van Tassels, like I said, there's descendants, throw a party, just like in the book. And you have parents out there. Some of the townspeople are there. You have townspeople trick-or-treating. Like I said, it's kind of like Hocus Pocus done with the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but you have these parallel stories about about Ichabod Crane while we're digging into the history of the town. So we're kind of working on mixing the different versions of the story and trying to decide what really happened. And what we do decide in this is that Ichabod, the real Ichabod, did leave. It was he did survive. He did leave, and that basically the new people in town are descendants of Ichabod Crane, and they've basically been called back to Sleepy Hollow, and they're there to try and, end a curse that's been placed on the families there. That we're actually, some of the descendants that we're seeing are not really descendants, but the ghosts of the original people, because Ichabod put a curse on them afterwards for the way he was treated. So there's different elements building into this, and it's, like I said, it's classic where it's taking the book, but it's kind of doing the story, and it's blending some different things and bringing it up to date with a new age. at the same time. So that's my pitch for a new Legend of Sleepy Hollow, where I love horror that's set in the past, because there's always, when you deal with people in the past who were really into superstition, it makes it much more fun, because they can believe anything compared to a lot of times our modern things. So we get a little bit of both worlds in there. And that's kind of just my pitch, my laid out story. And I love it. I've seen many different versions of the story. Cartoons, kids versions. The Hallmark had a version that was not that great, but there was elements in it that were worth mentioning. Like I said, they tried to do the whole, is the schoolroom haunted or not? And that's what we got. So that's my pitch for the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Happy Halloween to everyone. You want to say Happy Halloween, Sayla?
Happy Halloween!
And think about it. Let me know what you think, and enjoy this requel. So when I was pitching my Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I got thinking more and more. Something I wanted to say. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is one of the first American classic literature stories, and a first American ghost story. And it takes place during the fall harvest and Halloween festival. And my thing is, I've said this year, but there is a line between Halloween and horror. And I feel like the Halloween films kind of blurred that and started it. But horror is not Halloween. The holiday of Halloween is rooted deep in cultural beliefs of ancestral worship from Egypt, from Japan, from, Samhain. We talked about a little bit the Celtic beliefs and what that means, and with, the idea of the Celtic New Year and things like that, so slashers in just horror and gross, scary zombies, so that's not Halloween. That's just horror. And I have an issue with people who just kind of blend it all together and make Halloween's a holiday all about horror. It's really not. The tradition of dressing up goes back to, the belief that the spirits, that was the one night that the spirits could cross over, and the idea was that dressing up would help you blend in and hide from the spirits. The treats were about appeasements to the spirits. So much of like what American holidays are come from the different cultures that we pick and choose and take from and twist and turn and then, of course, commercialize into something else. So Halloween is definitely, it's not all about horror. And that's why, Jania tells me all the time, like, I'm a walking contradiction, because I do like horror, but I like thriller more. Like, I like suspense. I like atmospheric. I like gothic architecture and like a gothicness to it. And I like the horror. Excuse me. My fears to come from everything and not just some dude getting chased. That's why, honestly, I've never been a fan of the Friday the 13th series. I can't get into it. So all that to say that there is a distinction between what is Halloween and what is horror. That's why every year, there's my Monster Fest, I usually like in September, and then there's movies that I like to watch that focus on the holiday aesthetics. So I would want to incorporate more of the holiday history and aesthetics into my Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And I've decided that the title would be The Legacy of Sleepy Hollow. Yes, legacy, big word getting used, I know. But keeping with the L of legend, giving it something that identifies it, and goes, like I said, having these dual stories of basically where we're doing the Legend of Sleepy Hollow story with these new family who are representatives of the Crane family because they're descendants they didn't know about, building some mythology, building some more history to it. but still kind of doing the same beats. So that is part of my thought process for this. And I think Halloween is a fascinating holiday. Of course, for those who aren't familiar with it, part of just, church history. When I say church, it really refers more to the Catholic Church before the Protestant Reformation. But the idea that they would go into a culture, adapt its beliefs, and try to teach their religion through that culture's beliefs. And they looked at... It's early, people, I'm sorry. The Celts and the Druids, this festival, that's evil or whatever, they thought. So they created the official Catholic holy day of All Saints Day, which would be November 1st. A very holy day. And Halloween, before that, became the Feast of All Hallows Eve, meaning, the evening before I can't talk, a holiday and a holy day. And that's where Halloween really starts to get its namesake. That incorporates later, and then it goes back to just none of our holidays really that we celebrate is a pure version of what the cultural intent started as. And, I think that's just important when you're looking on making films or stories and, it's horror, let's just release it at Halloween. No, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. And that's why I think Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow kind of has this interesting thing where they don't ever say Halloween, but they do have that festival going on when Ichabod arrives. And they have, the movie came out in November around Thanksgiving, and it has the fall vibe, late fall vibe going on. But it's a little bit more horror. But the legacy of Sleepy Hollow would be about the look of what the modern idea is, what that story's come to be, and an analyzation of quote-unquote truth of what the events were. And we would reveal more that Ichabod was bullied and a little bit more picked on and looked at as an outsider more than what was depicted in the original story, and that the founding families actually are paying for what they did to this man. But that is the end of my pitch. Happy Halloween, everybody.